everyone, it's Sarah Todd. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Disney's Disability Access Service, or DAS, the recent changes that were made to this service, my experience applying for this service under these new changes, and why these new changes are not inclusive. So what exactly is the Disney Disability Access Service, or DAS? So essentially, DAS used to be a service that was for people with disabilities who struggled with waiting in a conventional queue. And this service was offered at both Walt Disney World in Florida and Disneyland in California. The way the service worked was you would apply for the service either at guest services or on a video chat prior to your visit. The cast member would essentially just ask you why you struggled with waiting in line. They did not want to see medical documentation or a doctor's note. They just wanted to hear from you why you struggled with waiting in line. They also did not want to hear a diagnosis. If your reasoning for not being able to wait in a conventional queue met the criteria for DAS, then you would be granted the service. I am a certified Disney adult. I have been going to Disney since I was little. The first time I went to Disney was in 2002 when I was a baby. So I grew up going to Disney and I just have so many happy memories from there and absolutely love going. And since I have had a physical disability since I was 8 years old, I have been using Disney's disability service for a long time now. When I was little, the service was much different and had an entirely different name. But when I went to Disney World in 2018, that was the first time that I used DAS. Applying for DAS was so easy in 2018. I brought a note from my medical professional explaining why I can't wait in a conventional queue, but they didn't even want to see my note. They just asked me why I struggled with waiting in a conventional queue, and then they set me up with DAS. Once I was set up with DAS, all I had to do was go up to the cast member at the attraction that I wanted to experience, and they would give me a return time based on the current wait for that attraction. So for example, if I wanted to ride Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, I would go up to the cast member at the front of that ride, and let's say the ride had a 30-minute wait, then I would get a return time for 20 minutes later, so 10 minutes less than the actual wait time, because then I would return and enter through the Lightning Lane line. Back then it was still Fast Pass in 2018, but I would enter through the Fast Pass or Lightning Lane line now, and I then in that line could have around a 10-minute wait. So it was always the wait time minus 10 minutes. Now the goal of DAS is not to let anyone skip the lines. You are still waiting the same wait time as everyone else. You are just not waiting in a conventional queue. So in 2018, I had a fantastic experience using DAS. That was before Disney implemented their app and let you schedule return times with the app. So like I said, you did have to go up to the cast member at each attraction. But then when I returned to Disney in 2022, Disney had then integrated DAS into their app. So once you got registered, you could then schedule your return times directly in the app, and you didn't have to walk up to the attraction to get that return time. So when I registered for DAS in 2022, it was still a fairly simple process. I did it in the parks at guest services, but it was a little bit more difficult than when I had done it in 2018. So I was asked why waiting in a conventional queue was difficult for me, and I provided my responses, but the cast member told me that one of the reasons I gave they could not accommodate for, but they could accommodate for one of the other reasons that I gave for not being able to wait in a conventional queue. And she proceeded to set me up with DAS and help me schedule my first return time. So it was fairly smooth, but I was surprised that one of the reasons I gave did not qualify under DAS, because that had not been my experience in 2018. When I returned to Disney in 2023, I decided to set up DAS ahead of time using video chat so that I was ready and set for my trip ahead of time and didn't have to worry about doing it in the parks at guest services. So I was able to register for DAS a maximum of 30 days before my trip online. So I went to the Disney World website once it was 30 days away from my trip, and I had to wait a couple hours for a cast member. But once I got on with a cast member, we did a little video chat. She asked me why I struggled to wait in a conventional queue and then set me up with DAS. And she also helped me set up some return times ahead of time. So for each day I was at the parks, I had 2 return return times for rides that were scheduled ahead of time, in addition to my first return time I would schedule once I actually got into the parks. I went back to Disney World again in early 2024 and March of 2024. I've had a lot of trips recently come up, which has been really fun. And I used DOS there again, both of those times. I scheduled it ahead of time on video chat. I had to wait a really long time in March. I think I was waiting online for about 2 hours, but I eventually got through and had no problem setting up DOS. I went to Disneyland for the first time in May of 2024 and also used DOS there. And the registration process there was very similar to how it worked for Walt Disney World. I had to wait a long time online to get a video chat, but once I was on the chat, I just spoke with the cast member. They listened to my concerns, and after a few questions, they gave me DOS. But in April of this year, Disney announced that they were revamping the DOS program. So as of May 20th at Walt Disney World and June 18th at Disneyland, DOS is now intended for guests who have a developmental disability like autism or similar and struggle waiting in line, rather than for guests with disabilities who struggle with waiting in a conventional queue. It is now specifically for guests with a developmental disability like autism or similar, to use Disney's words. So when I first heard of these changes, I was very alarmed because I do not have autism. I do not have a developmental disability. I have a physical disability, and it inhibits my ability to wait in a conventional queue. But Disney was specifically singling out developmental disabilities like autism or similar. So I was not sure how I would be accommodated under this new rule. So my mom and I have a trip planned to Walt Disney World in Florida for September because we're going to be in Orlando for something else. So we figured might as well go. So a couple weeks ago, once it was 30 days out from my trip, I decided I would attempt to register for DOS and just see what happens. So I went on to the online video chat and I requested the chat. Thankfully, I didn't have to wait at all. I've never had that happen. I literally did not have to wait a single minute to talk to a cast member. They were on with me right away. We Zoomed and they asked me about my concerns with waiting in line, and I told them all of my concerns that I've been telling cast members for years, and they proceeded to deny me DOS. Now, I was pretty much expecting to be denied DOS because I knew that the guidelines had changed, but I was still incredibly disheartened and upset because I have been using DOS for years to accommodate my access needs at the parks, and the quote-unquote accommodations that I was offered by the cast member instead of DOS do not meet my needs. When I got on the call with the cast member, they started out by telling me that the guidelines for DOS had recently changed and that a lot of people who previously qualified for DOS now don't. And I found it alarming that that was how they prefaced the call. But again, I was pretty much expecting to not be granted DOS. Once the cast member denied me DOS, they proceeded to offer me accommodations instead of DOS, which included return to queue. So essentially, the cast member told me that if I felt a medical emergency coming on and needed to exit a queue, that I was then able to do so. So I would just exit the queue, and that my mom, who was with me, would remain in the queue and progress through the line. And once I was able to return back to the queue, she would take a picture of where she was in the queue and send it to me, and then I would meet up with her. I told the cast member that I need to have my mom leave the queue with me because I need help from her, and I'm not able to take care of my medical emergencies by myself. And they said that we were both allowed to leave the queue, but they didn't have any answers as to how we would maintain our place in line. And in response to that, they told me that once I am ready to get in line for an attraction, to talk to a cast member and explain these needs to them, and they would provide me accommodations, but that they weren't sure what those accommodations would look like. Being offered this return to queue option was really frustrating for me because I know that oftentimes when you are waiting in a queue at Disney World, cast members are only found at the very beginning of the queue, and then where the standby queue and the lightning lane queue merge, and then right by the ride vehicles. And if I needed to locate a cast member to exit the queue, I would not be able to find one. And when I told the cast member this, they said to just leave the queue, not worry about finding a cast member. But I then am unsure how I would be able to return to the line since my mom has to come with me. I also have gotten very good at asking for help and explaining my needs to people and advocating for myself, but being told to talk to every cast member at every attraction and explain my needs to them before getting in line is just really not a feasible solution, because I should not have to explain my access needs over and over to tons of different people throughout the day and be wary of how they are going to react to what I say and hope that they're going to be accommodating. That is not fun. That is not what vacationing at Walt Disney World should be about. So I do not find that to be an appropriate solution in place of DOS at all. I have talked a lot about DOS and my experience getting denied DOS and why the changes to the system are not inclusive on my Instagram and TikTok. So I'll insert that video right here so that you can watch real quick. I got denied Disney's Disability Access Service yesterday, so come on my hot girl walk while I tell you about it. DOS is Disney's service to accommodate guests with disabilities at the parks. DOS was updated recently and the changes haven't been good. Until recently, DOS was intended for guests with disabilities who cannot tolerate waiting in a queue for an extended period of time. I used the service as recently as March of this year, and it was honestly a pretty accessible process for those who needed it to get it. The recent changes to DOS, Disney states that only those with developmental disabilities like autism or similar can get it, though I know a lot of autistic people are being denied DOS now too. This is a rough hill. I've had a spinal cord injury since I was 8 years old, so I have heat intolerance, which means it can be dangerous for me to be out in the heat for extended periods of time. The cast member I talked to yesterday told me that a lot of people who previously qualified now don't. They told me if I felt a medical emergency coming on to locate a cast member and exit the queue. When I explained why this wouldn't work for me, they told me to explain my needs to the cast members before getting in line at each attraction, but they weren't sure what accommodations would be provided. If you get denied DOS, it's too late to get your tickets refunded because you can't apply for DOS until your trip is a maximum of 30 days away. I met Disney's manager of services for guests with disabilities at a conference last year, so I emailed him about my experience yesterday, so we'll see what he says. While I have gotten a lot of positive responses to that video, I have also gotten a lot of negative responses. When I have shared my experience with being denied DOS and explaining why I need DOS on my Instagram and TikTok, a lot of commenters have been telling me to just rent a wheelchair or an ECV, and I've been seeing tons of other people who've been denied DOS being told that by either a cast member or people on social media. And this is such an unacceptable thing to say to someone because, for one thing, you have to pay money to rent the wheelchair or ECV, and you should not have to pay for an accommodation. Accommodations are supposed to be provided for disabled individuals at no charge. Additionally, I have not used a wheelchair since I was 8 years old and left the hospital after acquiring my spinal cord injury. And even if I did need a wheelchair, which I don't, I'm unable to push a wheelchair by myself because I have paralysis in my arms and hands. And I should not have to use a mobility aid that I never use in my daily life and cannot even operate independently when DOS enables me to access the parks. So there's also been a lot of discussion as to why Disney made this change in the first place, and it's not super clear why they did. A lot of people are blaming people who abused the system and saying that Disney said that about 60% of Lightning Lane usage was people who were using DOS, and that is probably true. However, people are always going to find a way to abuse a system. There is not a way to 100% prevent abuse. And if Disney really wanted to solve this problem of people abusing this system, they should find a way to do that that does not harm the people who genuinely do need this system. If abuse of DOS was Disney's concern, I blame Disney for the way that they are trying to address that, because this change is extreme and it is excluding so many people who genuinely need DOS to access the parks and are now not able to go to the parks at all, or they're able to go and have a very mediocre experience compared to what DOS enabled them to experience. So what my mom and I have decided to do is we are still going to go on our trip, and we are only going to go to Epcot. So we're going to be at Walt Disney World for 2 days. We're not going to any of the other parks. We're just going to go to Epcot, which is mainly why we wanted to go anyway. And we are going to have food and have drinks and enjoy walking around the world and enjoy the entertainment and shows. And we are not going to ride a single ride. It's really sad that that is what my experience at Disney is coming to, because I should be able to ride rides as I wish and as non-disabled people are able to do, but I am not able to access attractions without DOS, and the return to queue accommodation does not meet my needs. So that is essentially my experience with Disney's Disability Access Service in the past, and now my experience getting denied Disney's Disability Access Service and how that has negatively impacted my ability to access Disney. I really hope that Disney listens to all of us who are telling them that we cannot access Disney without DOS and makes some much needed changes, but I'm not so sure if that will happen, so only time will tell. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you found this video insightful, and I appreciate your support of me and my channel. If you're interested in seeing more frequent updates from me, I will still be posting on YouTube, but I do also post on Instagram and TikTok, and my accounts are linked in the description below, so be sure to check those out. I hope to see you all at my next video. Have a great day!